थैंक यू सो मच इकरा. फ़ौरन एक डिस्ट्रप्शन के बाद एक और डिस्ट्रप्शन के ऊपर हम बात करने जा रहे हैं. थैंक यू सो मच पैनलिस्ट ऑल ऑफ यू फॉर जॉइनिंग अस. Future of banking, I always say that this is the moment for banking, and veterans बैठे हुए हैं उनके सामने जुरत भी कर रही हूँ ये कहने की कि this is the iPhone moment for banking going on right now. The disruption from online banking to digital banking, now to digital transformation, and then digital immunity is happening. So we have excellent panelists here. All of them are a digital transformation expert. Ikra has given the introduction, and without further ado, I'll start with Umar, you. That your organization started 20 years back, and world from there has changed a lot. And future is looking more disruptive. How do you see that transformation from online to digital financial solutions and fintech app, and how are you keeping relevant, and what do you see the future of the banking looking like for you?
Thank you very much. So as you said, a lot is changing, and the change is happening at a very fast pace. So if we just look back at the past 2 decades, starting from early 2000s, that's where the digitization in the banking sector started happening. When I say digitization, it's primarily related to the online payments, the introduction of card-based payments and availability of card systems. And as the journey continued, we shifted to availability of different modes for the customers to interact with their bank and perform their banking transactions. So whatever happened in the last 2 decades, and the pace at which it happened, if we compare it to now, the pace has totally changed. So things that took 5 or 6 or 7 years to mature, these things now happen very rapidly. That's why it's really important for the banks as well as the technology providers and the fintechs to keep pace with them. So if we kind of look at the future of banking, or who exactly will be the customers for these banks in the future, we hear a lot about digital banking. We hear a lot about digital banks themselves now coming up. Basically, I think that there's a study that says that by the year 2025, which is next year, 25% of all the customers will be the Gen Zs, which are the people who were born in this century. And this is the kind of generation which were born with devices. They're used to doing everything online rather than going to an institution and doing anything. And they also faced the pandemic, and they're used to working from home. They're used to working in off hours and odd hours. So these are the kind of people who will be forming 1/4 of the customers for the banks. And obviously, the banks have to align themselves to serve these kind of customers. And the future of banking, we say that it's obviously the digital transformation is very important, but the other aspect is the customer experience. So it's really, really important to have a very clear understanding of what the customer is expecting, how to serve them in a better way, and to keep pace with it.
Yeah. So what I hear is that the technology is actually creating and asking for you to have a more meaningful and easy to use customer-based journey. And if I come to you, Fatma, because your organization is providing future of banking actually to so many countries, and you're talking about open banking throughout the world, how do you see this evolving in terms of customer journey and ease of banking for customers? Because now we are talking about digital natives. And digital natives' expectations as compared to us who were the digital learners and the commercial, the traditional banking and banker users, how the digital natives are expecting the open banking systems, and how do you see the future coming up?
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We have to take a step back and see that what has happened in terms of the evolution of banking. And over the last few years, if you pick up any study, McKinsey ki, about, they talk about how there is a shift, because that's where it all gets triggered. There's a shift from traditional banking to digital banking, where you see the advent of fintechs, where you see the advent of non-financial institutions providing financial services. There's so many examples that you have. So what has driven that shift is very important. It is also important to keep in, excuse me, can I have some water?
Sure.
It is also very important to keep in mind that the traditional banking model no longer serves in a digitally transformed environment. Globally, you see the margins, the revenue, the value addition by traditional banking models falling.
Yeah.
Capitalization is falling. And this is across the globe, not only in Pakistan. The second thing is, which is extremely important, which Umar was also mentioning, is customer expectation. You're absolutely right about digital natives, but fundamentally us as customers of any banks, our expectations have changed. We don't, 2-3 generations back, there was not that integrated viewing of, if you're going into a bank, you're going there physically to open an account,
Yeah.
but you're not really linked to, let's say, your insurance, or you're not linked to the loans, or you're not linked to medical providers, even e-commerce platforms. Now, today's customer doesn't want that. Today's customer does not have the patience to hear from their bank and say, you don't have a platform which is integrating the ecosystem, which is enabling that entire process of not only faster turnaround time, but also in terms of data not talking to each other.
Yeah.
Because obviously when you look at an integrated ecosystem, you are linking up different industries, if you think about it.
Yes.
And fundamentally, that is driven by customer expectations, of course, the advent of technology. So when we look at what is really driving the model for the future of banking, it is the customer at the end of the day. The customer also wants personalization. They don't want a one-size-fits-all. So that puts pressure on your traditional and conventional models and banks to change the way they're looking. The third element is the competition that has also come in, what I indicated earlier as well. So fundamentally, what you're saying is companies like Alipay or Kareempay or other amazing examples that we have, they are not traditional bankers, but they've provided this facility. So your conventional banks are forced to relook their business models as well, because they have that platform which they're engaging and bringing on that additional customer to them.
Absolutely.
Lastly, it is extremely important to leverage on the ecosystem that we have, whether it is payment gateways, commerce gateways, etc. One of the talks that I did in Riyadh a few months ago, there was a session in open banking. And as we know, there is a focus on 2030, unka jo MBS ka vision hai. And they're talking about enablement. But it was very interesting that in the audience, there were predominantly people who represented banks and financial institutions, but also e-commerce. When we talked about open banking and we talked about data integration and customer facilitation, they all wanted that. They wanted their lives to be on the smart devices, but they weren't open to sharing their information. I think that is where the biggest risk is. And it's just obviously the regulation and how the government takes it forward. But at the end of the day, in conclusion, because customer expectations have changed, it is the writing on the wall that conventional banks, traditional banks have to change their model to compete with not only their direct competition, but indirect competition.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that is deeply, thank you so much, Fatma. You pointed out very interesting element about data being very important, because it is all the customer data that is making it more complex for the banks and non-banking institutions to make it very competitive. And I come to you, Mahvesh, that your organization is actually analyzing that data for banks and giving the credit history and credit ranking and all that. Given that in traditional setups, it was comparatively easy, and I would not say in terms of the user experience perspective, but now the expectation is that if I am in need of lending situation or any lending services from any bank, then the customer requires it in the split seconds comparatively. In your ranking system, previously I remember कि जी 15 दिन के बाद तो हमारी एप्लीकेशन आगे जाती थी और ऐसे 2 महीने लग जाते थे पर्सनल फाइनेंसिंग को अप्रूव होने में. 15 if we are lucky. So I got that as well. 15 if I'm lucky. And here we are talking about seconds, not even days. How do you see that from here, and with the advent of blockchain as well, the data is more meaningful now. How do you see this disrupting the whole model itself, as Fatma has also pointed out?
Thank you, Subhat. Just like Fatma mentioned, data की एक बहुत significance. Can you all hear me? There's a significant importance of data, and honestly, we have very rich data that's available with us, with the banks, and important is that how they are taking leverage out of that data. For example, when we talk about digital experience, the expectation of your consumer is to have end-to-end transaction, be it any retail transaction, or it is somewhat connected with the lending, or on the friction of seconds. That's what we call the digital experience. And here is where we are somewhat still following the legacy decision making at our end, at the bank cycle. For example, if somebody is applying for a personal loan via their mobile banking application, the expectations is to either have that loan approved within the friction of seconds. This is what we expect from the digital lending experience. But अभी क्या होता है कि वो आपका जो process है वो break हो जाता है, and then it goes to the traditional credit analyst, and they analyze the application, and they make so to cover that gap, what we are coming up with, and I'm thankfully that a lot of banks are adapting to that. We are asking bank to take the leverage of the data that you have and the data that we have from the industry, combine it at one platform, जिसके अंदर आपकी policy, आपकी risk policy, potential regulations, आपका AML, CFT, any extra KYCs that we do, be it Nadra Verices, be it your credit scoring, data check, everything at a single platform, and you give. And you analyze the data, you give the feedback, okay, if the application is eligible for lending or not for lending, and if for lending, what's the limit. So everything is done in a fraction of seconds. So yes, the models are available. There are banks that are adopting to that model. They are bringing all that digital experience end to end, and that's like minimized to like 20, 30, 40 seconds with the decision.
How do you see the consumer behavior generating that model? Because right now, if we see globally, this is also happening, and I'll come back to Akbar about this as well. But from you as well, I want to know that my footprint is being generated everywhere.
Yeah.
At retail, at restaurants, wherever I'm going. And the check-ins are increasing as well. The likes on the Instagrams and all that generate a lot of behavior for the data to be. Do you see that impacting the overall your ranking and rating system, and then decision-making process being impacted through the blockchain, and then an automated or probably split-second and even minimized decisions about it?
So
or a push decisions rather than a pull decision?
So there are two legs to it. Number one is the basic awareness at consumer end at how this credit rating and the credit system works, right? So the basic awareness is where we lack. Still the consumer is not aware of the factors and the parameters that banks take in account for when they are lending, when they are assigning the limit. Still I have people coming into me that we have applied for loan at like XYZ bank, and we are not getting the credit card. Why? Because they are not aware of what the science is behind that decision making.
Yes.
Right. So your basic spending doesn't impact your credit scoring, but your behavior in terms of repayment, in terms of how you are performing in the market does impact your credit scoring model. So this is where I think the gap between the awareness to the consumers, that's the more of the area, but this is where the banks needs to look into.
Right. Can we ask someone to bring water for Fatma? I asked previously. Yeah, thank you. So I come to you, the MCB has been on the front end of leading the digital transformation from the disruption side in the banking as well, bringing a lot of new product, new areas as well. So Faisal, how do you see the traditional banking taking the new phase? And with the advent of all the non-banking challenges and new competition, new demands coming in, do you see the traditional banking completely changing? The brick and mortar model is already gone, the online model is already gone. Previously, whatever we're seeing on the app were also replicated on the web. Now we demand more as the customers, and so on and so forth. But how the digital transformation is actually creating the future for the banking, and what do you see as the future happening to the traditionals?
So, first of all, thank you very much. It's a very, very elaborated question. I think
Yeah.
we can be here till evening, but I'll try to summarize the way. So the conventional bank, they are transforming, but for them the life is very, very different. And not getting into too many details of specific brands, but the banks primarily in Pakistan or anywhere in the globe are segmented. So you have high street retail banks,
Yeah.
then you have specialized niche banks which are, I don't want to really class them in any category of consumer or customers, and then you have mid-sized banks. So the conventional bank are primarily the high street retail banks. So their demand from their customer journeys when we interact with them is way too different than from the niche or the digital banks, those who are coming in. So I'll give you an example, and not going too far, it's just simply my father. I spoke to him, I said, I'm your son, I'm a banker, why don't you have an app? And he said, my son, this is the only activity I have.
True.
If you're going to take that away from me, what will I do? And then you have a customer coming to us and say that, no, the banks is not about brick and mortar, it's about lifestyle.
Yeah.
And they don't want to talk about the bank, they just want to live a life, and they want a payment ecosystem around it to make sure that the fulfillment is being done. So those large conventional banks are going to 2-3 phases of transformation. One is the people transformation, which is at large catering the staff, the mindset. And not that it would resonate with my age too much, but I've seen the lives of the bankers who would actually take those brass coins when you go into to draw a check to a completely transformed thing.
Yeah.
So one is the people transformation, which is at large addressing the culture. Number two is adoption of technology, because if you do technology but you don't do people, there is the resistance.
Absolutely.
It used to be a point in time when we used to say technology, then process, and then people. Now it's the reverse order, is people, then process, and then technology. So cultural transformation is a must, that adoption of that mindset. Then is the process revamp, because there is a lot of process waste that exists in those conventional banks, because that's how they're being structured. Like we just lightly touched upon, might be a decade ago, 15 days a loan approval was a miracle. One would be on a moon, but now you want it now. You want to drive, you wish for a car and you want to drive away with the car when you are actually standing in a showroom, and you don't want to which bank you bank with. So that's the number two part. The third part is that we need to go through, as a conventional bank, a lot of digitization. But the buck doesn't stop here. The banks, the large banks at large, needs to understand the delta difference between digitization and being digital.
Yes.
To me, an app is as good as a branch, is a channel. It is not being digital or digitized. If a bank needs to be, can we wait for a while with these tapes? There's a bit too much of a disruption in the thought process. So digitization is when you automate a process.
Yes.
Deploying a bot in a bank is not being digital, is being digitized. Bringing intelligence to the bot is somewhere close to it. But when you bring a decision support system within a digitized process, this is where when you are going closer to being digital. And that is where you come and play the game of data. Not taking too much of a time, but when we get into that space and a lot of work is being done within the banks, initial thought process used to be that data is for reporting because we are heavily regulated by the central banks. But now when we actually meet our customers, it is about that it can play a pivotal role in easing out the customer journeys and how do we interact. Because there's a lot of history with the bank that I bank with about me, what I do in the next 30 days, and it is very easily predictable. Gives us another thing that you can't enter into this field again blindfoldedly, because when you come into the data space, you touched upon that the restaurant thing, the lights thing, and your customer spend thing. So it is far important that when you bring in these decision support systems, you bring the governance structure with them.
Yes.
Unless otherwise you do a model governance, it would actually create another beast to be resolved out of model bias, because you let go of a lot of decision support system to those machines. It could be, and we've seen a lot of movies, but that is also reality, might be a specific belief, ethnicity, or a race may not be able to get a credit approval if you have not modeled, governed the model rightly, because there are so many other factors which are socio-economic factors available in the public domain which may be driving and making this model learn. So a lot of baby steps. Last but not the least, for the high street retail banks, which primarily at some point in time, or now we also address them as conventional, my view is they will continue to operate in a hybrid fashion, because the outreach in the country as an ecosystem still demands a part of it being brick and mortar.
Yes.
There is one element which is beyond the bank's drive itself. I would love to bring the branches down, but it happens to be cash remains the king in the country for now. When we do the data analysis, we still see if we were to deploy cash collection machines, just in a supply chain, more than billions of rupees per day is being dumped as a cash. And that remains to be an absolute problem. Unless that is being taken away, yes, it will be digitized, it will become digital, but it will kind of run
Yet to
with the
see. Yet
hybrid
to see.
model. You see some brick and mortar, but you see some part of it.
Yeah.
Last part, on the app side, apps needs to be transformed again to the lifestyle. It needs to. A lot of data from your handset can be taken, but should it be taken? It's a question that needs to be answered, but it needs to be answered very wisely. Practically, an app can take away every click on the phone, but as a responsible corporate, should I be taking all of that away and taking your freedom into the machine and then start guiding you back? This is how you're supposed to do. Means intelligence could tell you that, okay, at 2 p.m. or 2 a.m., you actually log into Facebook, and should I open the Facebook for you?
Who does that data belong to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is where we need to draw the niche. And I see this is happening. It is happening faster than what we all anticipated. And I think a large is to be credit given to, I think it's on a hindsight, as it says, it's always 6 by 6, it goes to COVID, because we may have still been living in a
Yeah, we have been pushed into this domain
so it kind of pushed us way too fast into it. If we had an horizon of 5 to 10 years, it was squeezed down to a year. A tall order, but yes, I think we have done a lot. We've covered a lot of ground on that front.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's an elaborated answer, and I come to you, Akbar, because here we are talking about very interesting topic, and in our earlier discussion about this, where you actually enlightened me what is happening in the banks globally. You've been into the layer where you see a lot of transparency from the banking side as well as what is coming into the banking system. While you see this disruption happening globally, in the global context, and when you see this discussion happening here, Where do you see this taking not only the Pakistani domain, but the global domain, taking in view that the data here is, the privacy is important. In Pakistan's culture, probably the cash is still the competition from the bank, but globally it has transformed into a cashless society and even moving to the bitcoins and all that. Keeping that all context, where is that future taking the banking? Is it still limited to the banks and the financial institution, or you're seeing some other disruption coming in?
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I think first I would. Assalamu alaikum. Good. Thank you. I think first of being humbled to be here, but I think I want to thank sir you. It makes me so happy to hear that somebody understands the difference between digital and being digitized, because a lot of my time gets spent into explaining the difference between being digital and what is digitization. So thank you for explaining that. I think it's brilliant to see that happening. How I see when we work with some of the largest banks in the region globally, a lot has changed, and again, thanks to COVID, acceleration happened exponentially.
Yeah.
Consumer behavior changed, consumer shift happened, things changed, and that led to a lot of influx in data. And as earlier mentioned about open banking and other stuff, so I was in Philippines last month, Manila, talking at Digital Banking Asia on cybersecurity. I think that's one area why people are a little bit more concerned and conservative, is because of the data sovereignty, right? Who owns the data?
Yeah.
Where does the data resides? Who has the control of that data? How is that data being processed? Who gets to process it? So there are a lot of things that gets involved in that data processing and transformation. And that's where you see those laws coming, all the countries that we are operating in right now, you see those laws coming into play, such as GDPR, PDPA. Those are policies that are being implemented to protect the data from both ends, from a customer, from a consumer perspective as well, and also from the organization perspective as well, who are utilizing the data. So I think that's where I see the traditional banking is before. If I would go back pre-COVID, I would see traditional banking or conventional banking would compete with what we call today digital banking, but or we call fintechs. But post-COVID, I think they've realized their strength, their potential is very different from these smaller, nimble fintechs.
Yes.
These are very agile organizations. Conventional banking should not compete with fintechs, rather they should partner. And that's what I see now happening. So banks are not really, they are coming up with their own products, but are also actually more partnering with your fintechs, with your smaller organizations, rather than coming up, do it by myself. You cannot, because that's not your forte. That's not your USP. That's not what you're known for.
Core remains the same, and
Core
you
will always
yeah.
remain the same, as sir mentioned that attachment with the bank, with the person, will always be there.
Yeah.
But how do you transform that you are catering to the larger audience? And when Pakistan, look at the Pakistan demographics, right? You have a larger population of youngsters today. And then you further dissect that and you understand, where does this youngster live today, whether it's urban or it's rural? How do I get access to the bank, to the rural areas, to the youth of the rural? How do I do that? And that's where I see banks need to decide whether should I do it myself or should I partner with another agile, nimble fintech organization who is much more agile, much more faster, and have probably better execution to reach out to those rural areas. So I think that's where I see. Number two, I think the critical element when it comes to data, what I see is data security.
Yes.
A quick question, I don't know how many of you over here know about Log4j. The issue happened in 2021, 21st December 2021. It disrupted billions of dollars globally. It was a small vulnerability in the application that a lot of banks and telco used. It was made on technology called Log4j. That vulnerability existed for 6 years. Nobody knew about it. Until 21st December 2021, a hacker decided to exploit that, and it disrupted the entire global, the whole banks, telcos, government, everyone who were using that technology. The question then arises, how is my cybersecurity or my security, I would put under security, data security, how is my data security policy in place today? Back in the day, you would say, oh, you know what, I do my pen testing and I do my this testing on a quarterly basis. I think I'm good for now. It's not going to work anymore. The entire organization today, whether it's a bank or any other industry, the more you talk about digital, the more you talk about digitization, you are moving towards application. So your organizations are now running on software.
Yes.
How do you make sure that their application, the core application, whether it's core banking, retail banking, mobile banking, those core, and there are hundreds of applications, I'm sure you would know, there are hundreds of applications runs behind one application that a consumer see. How do you make sure that all those applications at every single layer is protected? So that's where I see banks are now moving away from your basic cybersecurity or security policies to what we call as software supply chain security or digital immune system. And that's how we are working with a lot of banks in the region to provide that support, where we make sure that every single line of code when a developer is writing, before it even goes to a test process and before it goes to production, there is no vulnerability, and it's checking in the real time all the time, 24/7. So I see institutions like banks, which are so heavily regulated, needs to invest in such technologies where you need to make sure that your data, your application, your core that people are interacting with is protected. Right? So that's how I see things are
You touched
transforming.
upon two major areas, and how I hear from all the audiences as well, and from the panelists as well, that it is the traditional banking should focus on the core, the security of the data, the user experiences, and leave the rest, the ecosystem, to develop over the period of time. And especially when it talks about Pakistan, and you touched upon that, and I like to jump to that question for everyone, and whoever wants to take up and move forward on that. Pakistan has a very unique case of a larger unbanked society. And when we see the future of banking going, how do you see the unbanked being banked with the disruption happening? Anybody could take the lead, and I'll move then.
So I think there are 2-3 aspects to that. One I already touched upon, that is the high street retail banks, those who have a deep outreach in the country. Another thing there where I would see, and it's with the full disclosure that is my just personal opinion and not to be directive about any specific organization. I've seen in developed societies where the post banks also do exist to create that outreach. By virtue of an organization, the Pakistan Post also does carry a banking license. We as a country were so far not been able to transform that organization, because that is the only organization as it stands which has the deepest outreach into the country, to the villages, to the chucks, and God knows to the every nick and corner. That can play a very, very pivotal role. We did embark upon a model of branchless banking that really helped to create a deep penetration into that country. But that kind of also had some parts which has some friction still. Because if somebody is sending 10,000 rupees, is he or she really willing to pay 200 rupees over the 10,000, because he or she still has to survive on those 9,800 that is being left out. So those questions needs to be addressed, because we do talk about frictionless, we do talk about deep penetration, but we are not being able to address some of the core issues right to the deepest core. Because some of us, when we the retail banks would say that, okay, let's have deep deposits, what is the customer profitability? But these are very nimble accounts. The customer behavior is very different, because the moment any household, the support that we all have at our house, you send them the money in their Jazz account or their Easy Paisas or any other account, not to be specific to brands. The psychological impact is the other part, which is the far end. The person is standing on the counter to draw that money out. So for institutions, it's not very financially viable entity. So it has to play a very pivotal role, both in terms of creating a conducive ecosystem, which is financially sustainably viable for an entity which runs it, governs it, ensuring that there is no data leakage that happens, because we did see that aspect taking place also. And then also reforming and transforming organizations like Pakistan Post, which has a very deep penetration. Last leg of that is, how do we take cash out? Because we do talk about financial inclusion, but what we skip out is, if you see your neighboring countries, both sides, which is one side is a very friendly state and the other side is a slightly not friendly, but we're trying to get friendly with it, because I see now we're opening trade. You see the traders taking payments, accepting payments on the QR code.
Yes.
So financial inclusion is not only restricted to making a payment somewhere far-flung in a village. It's also about what happens on a roadside, the pan wala, the burger wala, and the cigarette
Cashless
wala.
society has to happen,
So the cashless society has to happen. Around that, once it is being built, you see that the financial inclusion will automatically take place.
Yeah.
It would take away a lot of parallel system which is running in the country, because of the cash ecosystem, for which the government, we see, they're very strongly following up, that they...
Yeah, with the Asan account and all
Asan
that,
account and all of that, which is definitely going to help. But that's my very humble opinion, that it's a multifaceted problem that needs to be addressed from all corners to bring it to a common ground to address that.
Yeah, Fatma, you want
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to what has been said, you know, the fundamental challenge that we have is the mindset. And the mindset to transform in terms of the inclusivity part, yes, from a financial inclusion part, but also a mindset to be more transparent. And that's where it starts. One of the aspects that Dr. Ishita Sen also, he wrote a उनकी book है वो जो banking the unbanked,
Banking the
basically.
unbanked, yeah.
And it's fascinating, because yes, the issue is much more complex. It is governance, it is framework, but it's also mindset, where you're not just looking at transaction of a nominal value, where you're connecting with the rural economy, you're connecting with individuals in lower income stratas as well. It's not just about that. It's also about a community, a whole ecosystem, whether it is trader, whether it is, you know, from...
And the trust on the ecosystem
and transforming
of
the
the
mindset
users.
that is
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
So the issues are much more complex. However, with the digitization that is taking place and building digital economies, building e-commerce platforms, the writing is on the wall. Because if you want to do that, you have to have transparency and connectivity and documentation. So I feel it is a challenge. It will take much longer unless someone sort of has the will to power through it and say, this economy is going to be completely cashless. And therefore, we are bringing on individuals, irrespective of their profession, irrespective of their income.
And the social class, yeah.
I mean, you look at economies in Europe, most of the European countries are cashless. I was in Amsterdam, well, you know, whenever all of us or whoever's been there, you see, you walk into a hotel, you walk into even a small kiosk or a startup or even a coffee shop, it's all, where's your credit card? Whereas, the transaction that can happen online, there's no point in carrying cash in
Yeah,
that
yeah.
economy. So that is a challenge, and that is being replicated. Of course, it's a smaller economy. We have multiple complex challenges for Pakistan as well. From economy size perspective, it may not be comparable, but there is a will to power through that, and that is extremely important. And what we've heard from a digitization process, if you have enterprises, organizations digitizing their environments, creating enablement platforms, and then integrating it with other sectors, whether they're direct or indirect,
Yeah.
it is a matter of time that we have to shift
Yeah.
and power through
All
this.
good news, actually. The future is looking very, you want to say, add
I
something?
just wanted to
Sure,
add,
sure.
sorry, very quickly. So just touching on 2 points here. I think it's very, very important for a Pakistan context to enable organizations like Pakistan Post, because I guess we were discussing
Yeah,
earlier
yeah.
a very interesting success story. I'm based out of Thailand, so I've seen this happening during COVID, where the government pushed that, and exactly what mentioned about mindset shift, change of mindset. I think sometimes somebody needs to make that push happen, because all of us live in a comfort zone,
Yeah.
and we don't want to change.
Yeah.
But if somebody disrupts it, but there is no option for us to move to the next level, I think we will move. There will be resistance, but that push needs to happen. And exactly what happened in Thailand was, today Thailand is very much moved towards cashless economy, because during COVID, government gave out cash to all Thai citizens, right? But that cash was supposed to come in a digital wallet. And that digital wallet was introduced by the government. Now, in rural areas, how do you reach out to the farmer, to the persons who put a kiosk in a village and sell fishball? How do you reach out to them? And that's where government partnered with institutions like Thailand Post and 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go to Thailand, you find 7-Eleven in every corner. So they have huge access infrastructure across Thailand, and so is Thailand Post. So they became sort of an agent, where they reached out to these people, brought them on board digitally, because there is no branch, so then your eKYC process was all digital on a mobile app.
Yeah.
We have moved from fingerprints to facial recognition now. Fingerprints, nobody uses it anymore, because it's kind of getting towards invalid at this stage, right? So now we've moved to facial recognition. So that's how your eKYC process was brought into the place. And that digital wallet, then people got cash from the government. Now you've got cash in your wallet by the government. You can't use that money and go to an ATM and take that money out. What do you do? So exactly what government did was, those people who are selling fish balls or corn on the street, they brought them on board. So if I buy my vegetables or fish ball on that hawker, I only pay 50% from my digital wallet, right? So that's I'm paying. That person gets all the money, so 50% from me and 50% from the government. So that hawker gets 100% of his value, but 50% from the consumer and 50% from the
The
government.
relevance has to be created for
Correct.
the currency,
Correct.
digital currency to be used.
And today,
Yeah.
everybody, you go in a taxi, whatever, you ask them, can I pay by QR code? For sure.
True.
Nobody carries cash anymore.
Yeah. So we can, this is a topic which we can, I'll come to you, we can keep talking about it whole day. It's such a vast topic. I'll take just one question, because we have to have the limitation of the time as well, keep in mind. Yes, please, go ahead with your question. Can we have some mic, or? Unfortunately, you might have to, I'll repeat the question if you can read it out loud.
Right.
Initially, right? Now, as you were explaining the Thailand factor, look around in Pakistan, talk to the RAST, talk to the State Bank digitization program, and you will see that people are paying money through their mobile now, right? See the advertisement on the TV which tells you, Baji, रास्त है?
Can we
हाँ
move
है.
to the questions क्योंकि थोड़ा time हमारे पास
The
कम है.
question to my dear friend from CIO from MCB, what happened to KYC digital central program in the banking industry that if I have account with your bank, I can open any other bank account anywhere? What happened to that?
It's a very specific question, so I'll try to answer. It's work in progress as a motherhood statement. I would answer, but there are technical problems which are being addressed as we speak. Now, what are those technical problems? They may not be, and I'll try to summarize the answer. Otherwise, it's a very elaborated question. There are legalities, then technicalities. Now, what is the legality? The legality is number one, if I were to give your KYC to my partner bank, practically I will have to take the legal ownership of that KYC on the parent company while that data is being used by a parent bank. So that is one legal framework that needs to be addressed. The second part is that every customer, before the data can be shared by a partner bank, needs to consent that his or her data can be shared, because as per the regulation, without a customer consent, a data cannot be shared to the partner entity. So these 2, 3, and there are other minor details which are a work in progress that is being worked with the central bank. On a fast pace, I can tell you this much, that every day I've been asked about the prep. So preliminary prep work is being done as far as the provisioning of technology infrastructure is being done. As of last week, we were working on consent management because a guideline is being shared by the central bank on which the member banks, naturally they are not all member banks who is going to commence this journey. MCB is one of them who is the early adapters of this program. We have raised some of the domain specific operational questions with the central bank which are being addressed, and a part which is with the legal team on that legal framework. So I see it will progress, but as we address those issues fairly quickly, that would come to light.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, just wanted to add on this, on the same question Faisal Saab mentioned about this. So he's absolutely right that the legal and the regulation part is being worked on, and that's the key area obviously, but the technology part is already there. And would just like to share that we are part of that whole national eKYC platform initiative, where we have implemented that on blockchain, and it's an initiative by the Pakistan Bankers Association and State Bank of Pakistan. And the technology part is there, the frameworks are being laid, and this is just one use case that we have started with. And once this is out of the way, there is a lot that can be achieved through this platform.
Yeah.
So one of the use case that we've been talking with the central bank is also trade. So there is a long way to go. It's not going to stop at just at the KYC.
So I'm sure there are a lot of use cases that will come and keep coming, but one thing is very optimistic about it is that once the banks used to be the classist thing, and the used to be this, not to mention anybody's suits here because every man is wearing suit right now and I'm wearing one too. So, but it used to be a very classist thing, but now we're talking about the unbanked population, taking it the whole ecosystem and taking it away from the all the exclusions that were built in part of the system. And that's where the future of the banking lies, that you go all around, include the whole ecosystem, and disrupt the market in a way that the user is at the center of it. The customer, whether it's the business customer or the individual customer, they are at the center and the heart of the banking experience that they are having. And the core banking is focusing on the security, the data, the disruption that is happening in the technology, and reaping the benefit of that technology. Thank you so much, all the panelists. It's a very enriching discussion, and I'm sure that you must have enjoyed. Please give them a big hand.
Thank you.
I would like to request कि please remain here on the stage, and I would like to invite Azhar Nawaz Saab, Group CIO, Engro. We have some special mementos and shield for our moderator and the participants for their valuable time and the experience they have shared with us. Azhar Nawaz Saab, please give him a big hand. So, the first shield will be for Ms. Sabahat Bukhari, brilliantly hosted the session. In fact, she's working for the diversity inclusion, especially for the female entrepreneurs. It's her achievement. For Ms. Fatma Said, CEO, Abacus.